What's in a name? In the case of the new Bugatti, more than usual, I think. This is the Tourbillon.
If this film types your 35 or makes you feel a bit royal, then do please think about joining the Hagerty Drivers Club. You get an award-winning magazine and myriad other benefits. To find out more, just click on the link below. Despite the obvious family resemblance to its direct predecessors, the Veyron and Chiron, this €3.8 million Tourbillon is a totally new car. And despite the visual similarities, I think the ethos behind it shows a potentially interesting shift in the philosophy of hypercars in general. In fact, this might just be a watershed moment.
The figures are amazing. I don't actually think they are the biggest story. That's all to do with the name, which we will come back to in a bit. But this car has 1800 PS, 1775 brake horsepower in old money, and it's split up between electric and the engine. We'll get the electric out of the way first. So we've got three 250 kilowatt motors, two in the front and one at the rear, which also obviously acts as starter motor and reverse as well. The engine. Gone are the turbos, gone is the W16, and in its place we have a naturally aspirated 8.3 litre V16 engine, making 1000 PS, so what's that, 986 brake horsepower.
This monster of an engine has over 1,000 parts and will rev to 9,000 RPM. It has been produced with who else but the current kings of hypercar engines, Cosworth, and I thought it would be fun to do a little comparison. So, just as a reminder, here's what their two most recent naturally aspirated V12s sound like. First, the 6.5 litre Aston Martin Valkyrie. And now, the 3.9 litre GMA T.50. And this is a taste of what the Bugatti's new 8.3 litre V16 sounds like. It's a very distinctive, haunting, baleful sort of sound, and it reminds me instantly of the only other V16 I've ever heard, that of the BRM Grand Prix car of the early 1950s. That's despite the BRM's engine being tiny at just 1.5 litres and supercharged. Anyway, as well as sounding better, this new V16, which is mated to a new 8-speed dual-clutch transmission, also has other advantages over the old turbocharged W16.
It's lighter, obviously, than the W16, so this weighs about 256 kilos, which is pretty good, so that's about 50% more than something like the T50s, but obviously you've got much bigger displacement and the extra cylinders in there as well. Crankshaft is about 1 metre long apparently, which is, yeah, the physics going on in there should be incredible to try and understand. But that 256 kilos is about 156 kilos lighter than the old W12 engine.
Of course, this car does have a 25 kilowatt-hour oil-cooled 800-volt battery to haul around, allowing it to travel up to 40 miles on electric power alone. However, Bugatti says the battery has been integrated as a structural part of the car, which, along with a next-generation T800 carbon composite for the body shell, has helped save some weight. Overall, the Tourbillon is claimed to be a little lighter than the Chiron it replaces, at around 1950 kilos or 4,300 pounds. Now, to tell us a bit more about the aesthetics, engineering and the inspirations taken from the company's past, who better than the ever-affable Frank Hale, Bugatti's Director of Design.
Thank you very much for talking me around the design of this. It's extraordinary to see. The first thing that sort of jumps out at me is just, you notice the lack of height compared to Chiron. How much lower is it?
It's 33 millimeters lower. And as you know, in car design, it's all about proportion. No? You got to get the proportions just right. So it's the relation in size of one thing to another. So if you have a 20-inch in the front wheel and the rear wheel 21-inch, but then the roof is 30 millimeters lower, it immediately makes the wheels look bigger. And it's this proportional play that we love. Plus, as you know, in aerodynamics, it's about CD times A, so drag coefficients times A. A is the surface, the frontal area of the car. And this is really what we found in 20 years of wind tunnel development with Chiron and Veyron programs. If you just make the car lower, it is the greatest effect to a speed pickup beyond 400 kilometers an hour.
Which was something that's back in the day, Bugatti with the Type 57, the SC, that was the whole reason for doing that, wasn't it?
Exactly. This is Jean Bugatti. This is in the 30s now. He created the Atlantic, the car that we believe is one of the most beautiful cars on the planet. And he got a few things exactly right in terms of proportion, but also in terms of aero. So he took a Type 57 chassis and submerged the engine behind and below the front axle. So it's, in fact, one of the first front mid-engine cars, if you will. And so he got the bonnet lower, he got the seat lower, he got the roof lower, and ultimately he reduced frontal area through that. It's the same straight 8-cylinder compressor engine that he had on the regular Type 57s. But the SC, the S stands for surbaissé, so below base. And he made that car go beyond 200 kilometers an hour. We're talking 1930s, right? We're talking gravel roads, skinny tires, positive camber. Yeah. It might have actually been quite a scary thing, but nonetheless,
scary, brilliant, who knows?
Yeah, nonetheless, a remarkable achievement. And so we thought, well, wait a minute, the concept of surbaissé matches our observations in the wind tunnel. That's a beautiful source of inspiration for the new car.
And there are obviously sort of other tropes from that era as well. We've got the spine down here, which is something we've seen, which was obviously from the Atlantic when they had to rivet the spine down the car because they couldn't weld it.
He had the body crafted from a magnesium that couldn't be welded back in the day. So it was riveted together in the center. And it's ever since those days that the accentuated center line became part of our stylistic DNA for the brand. So that's why you'll find the new wide horseshoe has a central beam. This is actually to catch the pendulums in terms of a crash. But then the line is continued through the bonnet in this aluminium finisher, through the central windscreen wiper, and then goes into the interior along all the dials and the ambient lighting, and continues on the roof to become even the third brake light in the rear. And it's a cool thing. We believe that if you see this car from like 100 meters away and the third brake light comes on, you can, okay, that's a Bugatti now, from very far away, even before you see the rest of the car.
Yeah. I love a single windscreen, but I have a thing about it. Single windscreen wipers are just cool as well. Obviously, you mentioned the horseshoe there, which is actually, again, part of the chassis, is that right? So if you strip all the bodywork off, you still have the horseshoe underneath, which is quite cool.
If, let's say, a customer comes to the atelier in Molsheim where his car is being built and there's no body panels on it yet, you can immediately recognize it still as that brand, no Bugatti, because you still see the crash structure. Is actually the horseshoe. And aerodynamically also, and thermodynamically, it makes sense because you get in on the highest pressure air, or air pressure on the whole car, which is the front horseshoe. You get that really wide air intake, and then we feed the air through the radiators and out the bonnet, out the top, and any kind of air that you feed in through the front and push up above.
It's like an S duct, basically.
Has an additional effect on the downforce, no? Yeah. And it's downforce that you don't have to pay for with drag, right? And it also enables us to have the whole front end, the whole front clam is one piece, which in turn again enables us to make these body panels really thin because we have multiple mounting points underneath. And so then you can construct a bootlet for the trunk, for the front trunk, which weighs like not more than 700 grams. And in turn, it's just this little hatch, but it gives you access to a sizable amount of boot space, actually larger than the Chiron even, which you load a very long suitcase into. It's kind of odd shape, but we like our odd shaped luggage because it kind of gives away what you drive, no? If you turn up with that in a hotel. And then that also enables us to construct the hinges in a very thin way because it only weighs 700 grams, the whole lid, no? And then the lock can be smaller, and it's a whole chain of causalities that leads to lightweight construction like that. No?
You would never guess, actually, looking at this just straight away, that it was one piece, because you have all these amazing sort of shapes on
Yeah,
here.
we call those the flying fenders, no? Because we now actually managed to squeeze down the low beam and high beam modules for the headlights down to 12 millimeters. We were already very proud back in the day when we did Chiron to get them down to 35 millimeters. Now they're even just 1/3 of that, covering the whole high beam and low beam functions. And through that, we could design the headlights in such a slim way that we could feed air in underneath the headlight and stream the air through these ducts and into the side air intakes to pressurize the intakes for the engine.
Ram air, basically.
Naturally aspirated engine, not charged, will not actually pull its own air, so any bit of extra pressurization on the intakes will be better for the performance, certainly.
Yeah.
So and it's in that way that we spoke about timelessness, no? So how do you make a car timeless and endure the centuries? This year we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Type 35, so these things are around for decades at least, if not hundreds of years. Once built, hopefully never crash, they don't somehow disappear, no? They endure the decades in the connoisseurs' garages, let's say, and being taken care of.
We'll come back to crash structures in a second. Something else, obviously, from that era, the Royale Type 41.
Type 41,
Type 41. Obviously brought in the sort of the idea of the two-tone, which we have on this as well,
Yes.
which brings us to this, which
Yes.
is another sort of motif
Trademark.
that we've seen.
Yeah. Trademark Bugatti line on it. It's also the physical parting line between the two-tone paint scheme. No, many customers like to configure their cars in two tones. It works beautifully in a monochromatic format as well, but here we have it in two-tone, and it's a nice separation line as well, as it's trimmed in this aluminium polished finish.
Right. I think we should have a talk about the back of the car and
Yes.
your patents that are at the back.
While we move round to the back, I think it's worth mentioning the suspension, because it has, to my eyes, perhaps the most beautiful parts on the whole car. It's a multi-link setup, front and rear, made up of these organically designed 3D printed aluminium parts. They are just stunning, but they also save 45% in terms of weight compared to the steel parts on the Chiron. Tyres have always been a talking point with Bugattis, and these Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2s measuring 285/35 R20 at the front and 345/30 R21 at the rear have been developed especially for the Tourbillon. Now, let's have a look at the aerodynamics and the rear of the car, which I actually prefer to the front.
I love the sort of the more accentuated haunches of the car as well. I think that's
really, it's the play of positive and negative.
Yeah.
No? It's almost sculptural. There's no line on this at all. It's just surface and reflection. No? There's something.
And obviously we can see, we've got the engine exposed as it
Yeah,
was.
that was a hard fight not to have a glass cover on it, actually. Still in the year 2026 when we come out with this baby. And to fulfill all the pedestrian laws. But we managed to do that. And that's why we now have a free engine bay. You can still fully breathe in. And
You're saying this is why the sort of cages around the throttle bodies.
yes, so those are 82 millimeter throttle bodies, the biggest ones we could find. However, they come obviously not meant to be exposed like this. So we put them in little, let's say, aluminium cages that then again have rounded off corners, so nobody can ever get hurt on this. And that's how these came to be.
Amazing. And then round the rear, so this is, as we come around here, we've obviously got the light motif around here, but the diffuser is the big thing at the rear.
Yeah, this is another takeaway, let's say, from these 20 years of doing these high-speed programs. No? You want to create the car to be aerodynamically neutral at speeds beyond 400 kilometers an hour, not utilizing a wing. Because any bit of aerodynamic bit of downforce that you create using a wing, you pay for with drag, right? And we didn't want drag here. So the most efficient thing is to keep the wing retracted in top speed. Yes, it does have a button to deploy the wing, and you would use it on the racetrack in handling mode, or it would air brake, obviously, if you hit the brakes really hard. But in top speed mode, it stays retracted, and it's only through the base shape of the car that we managed to achieve that. So the car cancelled out enough lift with the downforce that it creates to be aerodynamically neutral at top speed. Which is, it sounds like, oh yeah, okay, no, that wasn't easy to do. And the enabler here is this diffuser. So we no longer have a crash beam in the classical sense in the rear that is made from metal. No, we have these fins here that are actually structural, and they are what takes the hit, let's say, and absorbs the energy. They crumble upon crash, like a Formula One nose cone. It's an idea that came to us when we made the Bolide. The Bolide also has a carbon nose cone that has different thicknesses of carbon laminated into them. So the more it crashes, the more resistance it offers. So, and this is also the patent here, the carbon structures inside of this. So this is the carbon skin, let's say, but there's a structural piece underneath that bonds to the frame, and this is what takes the hit, and this is what enables us to not need a beam here. And this is again what enables us to pull the diffuser channels up so high. You can see they are knee high, and if you imagine the trailing edge of the diffuser and the trailing edge of the wing, you can see how close we brought them together. It's very close to the aerodynamic ideal of a drop shape, you know? And so the maximum angle that we could find, that you could make a diffuser rise before you get tear-offs is about 11 degrees. Anything beyond that, you get tear-offs, and then it becomes inefficient. So if you have that, you want those channels to be as long as you can. So those channels are now 2 meters long. They basically start right under the seat. That's how far they reach forward, and that's the beauty of this project, because it's very rare that you can draw up from the white page down into the very bits and pieces of architecture of the car. Something like this.
And as I understand it, it's quite difficult with carbon crash structures because you have to avoid the material sort of effectively sort of going into the crash structure and hardening as it goes in. So
yeah, to simulate how they behave upon crumble is really the expertise here. And to laminate those that they repetitively in any part perform the same. This is exactly the challenge, and we've managed to do that on this car.
We look under here, we've obviously got, you can see one of the lower wishbones. I know the thing about underneath this, again, you've got 3D printed aluminium wishbones.
Yes.
That's obviously an airfoil shape. It looks like it's in the angle of kind of the airflow through. Is that?
So it's an airfoil shape, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's even pitched at the right angles to flow with the direction of flow of the air, which is another thing. So to further energize the diffuser, we have incorporated the exhaust tips right at the trailing edge of the diffuser channel. Why have we done that? Is because at top speeds, it's a naturally aspirated 9,000 RPM, 8.3 liter. It's basically like a giant air pump.
That's a lot coming out
and
of that.
the air mass flow out of these exhausts is substantial, and it actually accelerates the air that comes from the diffuser. So it enhances the suction effect of the diffuser, and all of that together enables us to keep the wing in. We don't need the wing anymore for that. So it's the interplay between this little ducktail tear-off edge and the diffuser channels.
Which makes you very happy because it all looks very sleek.
And that's good again for the design, and this is what I was saying. It's always this interplay. That's why we regard, let's say, the development team as one team. It's not like, okay, there's the design team and there's the engineering team. And yes, there are different interests, but we like to regard our group of development people as one group.
Now, I promised I would come back to the name, Tourbillon. It's French for whirlwind, but what makes it interesting to me is that it's most commonly heard around the world in association with watchmaking. This little spinning heart in here is a tourbillon. It was invented in 1795 by Abraham Louis Breguet. And the idea is that the escapement, the balance wheel and the balance spring are all housed in a little rotating cage. What that does is negates the effects of gravity on all the parts within it. It sort of balances it out, I suppose, which is important if you're got in a pocket watch and it's hanging from a chain like that. The idea was to obviously improve the accuracy of the timekeeping. It makes less sense actually in a wristwatch, which is obviously moving around on your wrist all the time like that anyway, but nonetheless, it is revered as a beautiful and skillful piece of watchmaking. Why all this talk of watchmaking?
Well, I think it becomes pretty clear when you look inside and you see these dials here, which even have, actually, look down here, it says Horloge Suisse on them. They talk as well about the skeletonization of these dials, which is something you talk about in watchmaking when they expose the movement behind a dial. And they are absolutely stunning. These are mechanical needles, so you can see the gears behind working away. And they had to work really hard. They took sort of learnings from the medical industry, in fact, to get these needles to react quickly enough. Imagine, obviously, all that instant torque from electric motors, and to be able to show that, it has to move very quickly, like a flyback chronograph or something like that.
The dials are made mostly from titanium, have over 600 parts, and are built to tolerances as low as 5 microns. You can even see the jewels used for bearings, just like in a watch movement.
Other things to mention here, well, obviously we've got this wheel, which now moves around, a sensor like that. This all remains fixed. And talking fixed, this seat remains fixed in terms of fore and aft movement. It will still move up and down, and obviously the back reclines like that, but the pedals move, and obviously the steering wheel moves as well, so that's how you get comfy. And they've done that because it means they can take out the runners underneath, get the seat that bit lower to move in with this obviously lower roofline that we were talking about before, 33 millimeters lower than the Chiron. Glass, that's quite important here. We've got sapphire glass in here, and then we've got crystal glass in here that's all machined from one big block, which was, as you can imagine, pretty complicated to do, and had to be sort of done in a certain way that so if you are in a crash, obviously it didn't shatter and become dangerous in the car. You'll also notice really no screens in here. There is one for the Apple CarPlay and that sort of thing, but it's hidden away. So they want this to be analog, not digi-analog, I suppose, all buying into that whole sort of timelessness idea. It's worth saying as well that this is something Bugatti has done really well in terms of the tactility, so I'm expecting that to be on perhaps an even greater level than before. I think it was really, particularly in Veyron, you noticed that was a very pure car in terms of its interior, and actually sort of this is almost an extension of that, just taking it to the next level.
Just 250 tourbillons will be built, and despite deliveries not starting until 2026, all of the cars have already been sold. Clearly, people aren't concerned that it's a bit slow.
I said I would come back to the performance figures on this, because they haven't been trumpeted in quite the same way as we've been used to with the Veyron and the Chiron. They are still mind-blowing, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, 62 miles an hour in 2 seconds. That's just bonkers. But, as we all know, electric cars, including this car's cousin, the Nevera, will beat that.
In fact, it looks like the Nevera will pip the Bugatti at every accelerative increment up to 400 kilometers an hour or 248 miles an hour, a speed that the Tourbillon will reach over 7 seconds faster than the Chiron. The Tourbillon's top speed of 276 miles an hour is faster than the 1,887 brake horsepower Rimac, but Bugatti doesn't even seem to be making much of a thing of that. Probably because, well, it's not as fast as the limited edition Chiron Supersport 300 Plus. No longer is performance the primary selling point with this new Bugatti. And I think that's because we're at a crossroads for supercars, akin to the quartz crisis experienced by the watch industry in the 1970s.
You see, with the advent of the quartz movement, accurate timekeeping was suddenly easy and cheap. Great companies like Ulysse Nardin, founded in Switzerland in 1846, supplier to the US Navy of fantastic marine chronometers, they were suddenly left floundering. What was the point of their wonderfully accurate mechanical movements? But here we are today, and such companies are very successful. People love looking at things like this amazing carousel movement in here, or turning the watches over to see the Côte de Genèvre, the fantastic finishing on the movements. And I think that the supercar market is going through something of its own quartz crisis. No longer are power and performance the sole objectives of these cars, because EVs have kind of made that, well, null and void. So what to do? Well, supercars need to double down on other aspects of what make them so special. Things like fantastic sounding naturally aspirated engines and, well, the mechanical engineering that is wonderful to look at. Given that, I think they can be successful. Just as this needs to keep time accurately, yes, the supercar needs to have performance. But no longer, I think, will it be the raison d'etre.
That's what I think Bugatti, previously the bastion of high-power, high-performance hypercars, is now saying with this new car called Tourbillon.